Hello, friends. Today is the 25th of August, 2013, and I'm taking a little interlude here to look at some of the sections in the old commentary and in the book Esoteric Psychology 2. We have, I'm going to begin on page 29. Perhaps one day I'll do more of Esoteric Psychology 2, but I'm going to concentrate particularly on the text that surrounds the old commentary sections. And here we will have before long the discussion of the Blessed Ones, which I have always felt to be, in fact, the monad in incarnation. That extension of the monad, which is the human being and the human consciousness. If you trace it back far enough, I believe you arrive at the monadic plane, where you have the full monadic awareness, but I think what we have is an emanation of monadic consciousness, which is the consciousness of the soul body, provided by the solar angel, or at least tended by the solar angel, if not provided by it, because some of our human beings came into incarnation with an egoic lotus already formed, and with a few of the petals unfolded, perhaps. Then it would be the task of the solar angel, in its own way, to substand that egoic lotus and to infuse its presence into that egoic lotus. Of course, one goes into pralaya between, let us say, the moon chain and the earth chain, and we don't know how those structures survive, or whether simply the ability to rebuild them as they were is what survives. But in any case, it's my impression that the solar angel reunites, or unites even with the moon chainers, for whom it held no responsibility at the time of individualization on this particular globe, in this particular chain. The moon chainers came to themselves, or came to a realization of their selfhood in a different way, through the upward striving of the animal nature and the response of their own spiritual nature without the intervention of the solar angels. Yet, in our particular globe and in our particular chain, the solar angelic method of intervention and stimulation is used. And so they would necessarily have to become involved with those more advanced members of the human family who were brought over from the moon chain in the third subrace of the fourth root race on our particular globe and in our particular chain. Nevertheless, it is always the monad itself that is responsible for the initial impulse of individualization, and the solar angels are there with their interventionary methods to facilitate that process and to create a bridge between the monadic triadal worlds and their lower reflection in the three worlds of human evolution. And without that type of intervention, millions of years would have gone by, and modern humanity would have been far less developed than it is now, even though they were more advanced at the time of Earth individualization than were the animal men who were individualized, obviously, because they came in from a previous system in which they had, well, some from a previous system and some from a previous chain in which they had already been human beings. They carried individualization with them. They were that. Their method of individualizing was different, but they still needed the intervention of the solar angels, in my view, to work with them, to attach to them in a way and to continue supervising their development. DK seemed to suggest that without such an intervention, even the more advanced humans of that earlier period would be far behind where the type of man on in our chain and globe who has not been supervised by the solar angels now stands. We do have some groups of people who were not individualized by the solar angels per se. There was no spark of mind implanted in them, or at least no stimulation of the mental principle carried on through the ongoing presence of the solar angel within their energy system. Rather, they were brought towards individualization by the stimulation of their own mental apparatus, which had been worked up from the level of instinct. And then the solar angels are not really invested in them in the same way. But there is an intimate connection of the solar angel with all those who have been individualized on this globe and in this chain, and with all those who, coming in from the moon chain, required the presence of the solar angel to promote their continued development in the newly adopted chain, the fourth chain, to which they came from the third. All of this is a bit of a preamble to discover who the Blessed Ones really are. The Blessed Ones are the monad, but they are the monad in incarnation. They are the monad that has gone forth from the monadic plane. They are an emanative extension of the monad. They are not the monad on its own plane, which still exists even while they exist, just as a flame that lights another flame, a candle that lights another candle still exists, even though the candle which has been lit goes forth and does other things. So the monad on its own plane exists, and that type of consciousness for us exists, but we are also the monad in extension, and I feel that that's who the Blessed One really is. And the Blessed One awakes to its own nature at a certain point and realizes that it is spirit, that it is not the solar angel who has provided for it a vehicle of consciousness on the higher mental plane, that it is entirely its own being. Of course, ultimately all monads are one, but that realization of the non-differentiation of the monads is a later development, I would say. So whatever we think we are, whatever being we have, whatever consciousness is associated with that being, it's all, to me, the consciousness of the One. It's all monadic consciousness at different stages of what I call prakritic immersion, or immersion in matter. So when we are being the personality, we have personality consciousness. It's really an extension of monadic consciousness, highly attenuated. When we are achieving soul consciousness, it's really monadic consciousness in a freer and more expansive area than area of material limitation than had been the case when we were, strictly speaking, realizing ourselves as personalities. The monad has a more refined and expansive and responsive vehicle to work through when it is working through the egoic lotus provided by the solar angel. When the monad works through the spiritual triad, it's still the same consciousness, and we do achieve, through the organization of the vehicles of the spiritual triad, a still more expansive, impersonal, world-unifying consciousness than we had when we were confined to the causal body. And eventually the monad or the Blessed One, the prodigal son who has gone forth, returns to itself and there reunites with the father and with the brother who had remained at home. It's all in the parable of the prodigal son. There's a kind of a Geminian division here. The brother who stays home, at the home of the father, and the brother who goes forth. And they are both the monad, but in this case, during incarnation, the Blessed One, in my way of understanding, is the monad in extension. We awaken in this world and here to the realization that we have always been the one spirit. No matter who advances and in what arena they advance, it's all one advance of one being, which is apparently divided through emanation, but is not essentially divided at all. So I've chosen to go into esoteric psychology here at a certain point. I'm tempted to want to read the whole book, but what I think I will do is to carry on certain discussions in selected areas of the book now and then, and especially those areas which have these stanzas from the old commentary as part of their material. So in the book there's been a discussion of individualization, initiation, and identification, the three phases through which the consciousness of the human being will pass. And it says, as we close our discussion of the three steps of individualization, initiation, and identification, which marks the progress of the soul from identification with form until it loses itself and its own identity in a higher identification with the Absolute One, let us carry our thoughts forward to that point in time and space where the spiritual consciousness releases itself from all the categories of awareness and all differentiations. The spiritual consciousness releases itself from all the categories of awareness, all the differentiated types of awareness, of impression, and from the final sense of selfhood, and merges itself in that sublime condition in which self-centeredness, as we understand it, disappears. This is the eventual destiny of every initially self-conscious unit. We develop our self-consciousness at the stage of individualization. For long cycles we remain identified with our vehicles, thinking we are our body, that we are our vital energy, that we are our desires, that we are our thoughts. But initiation is the process of extrication from those identifications, lower identifications. We break the bonds that attaches our consciousness to these lesser perceptions which we deem to be ourself, and eventually enter into a state of self-realization where we are identified with true being, with that which we have ever and always been. And we de-objectify our consciousness. Or when we look at what is apparently the object, we realize, yes, it is us in an essential way, but not in a particular way. So we remove our capacity for identification from particular objects and see all objects as emerging from the essential. And that essential is essential being which we are. So we lose, a consciousness loses its lower identifications, i.e. loses itself, and its particularized identity in a higher identification with the Absolute One. And this is known in a general sense as samadhi. There are various states of this ecstasy, bliss, identification, and the scholars and practitioners of the past have differentiated among the different states of identification with the higher principles or with the Absolute One, but in general it is samadhi, a state of what's sometimes been called divine contemplation, and we will carry our thoughts forward to that point still in time and space, we would say, still in time and space, wherein the spiritual consciousness, the consciousness of the immersed monad releases itself from all the specific categories of awareness and all differentiations, and realizes differentiation to be a practical actuality, but not a reality. So differentiation is realized to be a practical actuality and not a true reality. And from the final sense of selfhood, where we identify ourselves with a particular ring pass knot, i.e. in which we identify ourselves with a particular ring pass knot, and merges itself in that sublime, elevated, heavenly, high condition in which self-centeredness, as we understand it, disappears. Well, self-centeredness, he has to interpolate this phrase as we understand it, because in a way a sense of self will remain and a sense of center will remain, but what do we do? This means the transference of the self to every location. And it's called, in the Leonian language, this is called the relinquished point. The point of self-identity is seen and felt to be everywhere, so that no longer is it simply the center of certain continuous perceptions of body, desire, mind, as if these were the only real factors in self. The point is relinquished and sent elsewhere and everywhere. And we realize our expansive nature, and that we are the point which is everywhere found. So we become all points of identity, and are everywhere found. And this is a true decentralization. It doesn't mean that we, let's see, I better spell that correctly. True decentralization. It doesn't mean that we've lost our identity, but we have merged particularized identity into a pervasive, planet-wide, system-wide, universe-wide identity. We have discovered ourselves to be everywhere, and in that sense we become capable of harmlessness. Harmlessness is the expression of the life of the man who realizes himself to be everywhere. Well, What a great demand that is, to realize that one is not only one is within every perception, and one is the identity which is behind every perception. One is the essence which has caused the emergence of that which is perceived. So one is the divine essence which has caused the emergence into actuality of that which is perceived. Well, the subject-object unification is true contemplation. Subject-object unification is true contemplation. And we shall later consider the stages wherein the soul, impelled by its peculiar ray qualities, appropriates to itself, for purposes of experience, those forms which can be expressive of and responsive to the many types of divine awareness. And this will be the study of appropriation. There are so many essential studies in this book, Esoteric Psychology, either Volume 1 or Volume 2. Volume 2 tends to be more technical in terms of the process which the human being follows and should follow to unfold consciousness in a higher way, to leave behind the customary personality consciousness and enter into a different state of consciousness altogether, which is characteristic of perception on the higher mental plane and beyond, into the realm of the triad, which is the true ego with a capital E, and that has to be realized. It's really the end of the transcendent personhood, and entering into, in the words of eminent psychologist Robert Gerard, transcendental perception. All that pertains to the monad can be considered transcendental, and all that pertains to the soul can be considered transpersonal, even though built up upon personal realizations and achievements, built up upon work accomplished in the lower worlds. Okay, it should be noted here, therefore, that there are literally 2 points of identification in the long experience of the soul. Well, whose experience is this? In the long experience of our developing consciousness. One marks the stage wherein form, matter, substance, time, space are controlling factors and imprison the soul. Or when we talk about imprison the soul, we mean limit the consciousness to lesser perceptions. There will always be perception. There will always be registration. The perception and registration will be of those conditions found in the lower 3 worlds. Imprison the soul within their types of consciousness. One marks the stage. 2 points of identification. I mean, who do we think we are? What do we think we are? That ends up being very important. You cut your finger and you say, "Look what I did to myself." Someone has a wound of some kind. What did they do to you? There's such a complete identification with the body in so many consciousnesses today. And by that I mean the lower and physical body, which is not even undergoing real principle development in this solar system. It's a great error. It's a great illusion. It's a maya. It is a mistake. And it takes a long time to stand back, stand under, stand beyond, and realize the instrumental nature of the vehicles. Many lives can be involved in this. So this is a long period in which we have identification with form, matter, substance, time, space. These are the controlling factors, and they limit the consciousness, imprison the consciousness within the types of consciousness which are attached to these factors which represent life in the lower three worlds. This connotes identification with form life, and it's where we find most people today, even intelligent people. They're still, in a way, within the hall of ignorance, because the higher of the pairs of opposites has not made its appeal. Of course, sometimes it can make its appeal in earlier lives, and then that contact will be shut off for a time while they build up other faculties, for instance, such as the intellect. The mystic is often asleep within the intellectual, and the gains of the mystical phase are still part of the equipment, but they have been but the mystical phase has been subdued. The mystical sensitivities have been subdued so that other faculties can be developed, and such people as this have known there is a higher of the pairs of opposites, but have temporarily relinquished belief in it or relation to it, so that they could build in other faculties. I had a friend once. He was a fine musician. He was born blind, and I realized something. He was so acute in the musical field. He had perfect pitch. He could understand every harmonic transition and exactly what it was. It was a acute type of musical perception. I realized that his blindness had made it possible for him to so concentrate on a particular faculty that he raised it to a very high level, which will serve him well when again he regains his sight in another incarnation. So when we see people being apparently fairly one-sided and concentrated in a particular life, we must not assume that the faculties that they are not now emphasizing are not somehow resident within them. We'd have to have real soul perception to know whether or not this is the case. Okay, so the other type of identification, the other connotes identification with all that lies outside of form expression and is released from it. So thinking of oneself as that which is not form. And then the image of the self becomes less substantial and more ethereal. Many people think of themselves as quite a dense object, whereas the realization of self as a more ethereal something is already a stage of progression. What that may be lies beyond the grasp of our present humanity. Let's see, well, basically, in essence, soul and spirit. Spirit monad. And I think I have an idea. You know how, no, some things are used, you know, SPMD. I'm going to use that one. I like to make these abbreviations, you know, and we'll do it this way. Spirit monad. It helps in the long run if words are used frequently, concepts are used frequently. What that may be, what type of identification this is, and what is that which lies outside of form expression, is beyond the grasp of our present advanced humanity, and it is only known in its true significance by the great existences as the Christ, the Buddha, and those of analogous rank in the hierarchy. And I think basically he's saying that what being is, what spirit is truly known only to great existences, as he describes it. The qualities generated and developed through the first of these identifications persist and color the conscious realization. So we do not lose the faculties generated during the period of identification with form. And it must be remembered that the final identification is the result of the experience gained through the medium of the first. It's a bit like, we might call it, in a way, the law of continuity. It applies to planetary rulerships. You know, we outgrow an emphasis. Let's say we're born in Aries. We outgrow the emphasis on Mars and move to Mercury, but we do not lose Mars. It becomes a subset of our Mercurian focus. And when we move to a Uranian phase in the sign Aries and are animated by the hierarchical ruler Uranus, we do not lose Mercury, which is a lower octave of Uranus, and we do not lose Mars. We just, the proportion changes. The greater emphasis is on Uranus, and that particular approach includes the gains and the tendencies of Mercury and even of Mars. So the qualities that we build up serve us, even though the emphasis changes. The qualities which we build up during the phase of identification with form are preserved and form a part of the wider life, which supervenes when there develops divine purpose, develops identification with that which transcends the form as usually considered. Yes, I'd like to make an abbreviation there too. Let's see, AUC. Oh, it's already existing. These qualities will vary according to the dominance of one or other of the ray energies, but there will be in the final consciousness stages no consciousness of quality or ray type, but simply a state of being or of livingness that realizes identification with the whole, and which at the same time holds in solution, if one may use so unsatisfactory a term, all the results of the lesser identifications. So we would say that I was looking for the word myself, and I think, DK gave it very well here. So the emphasis is not upon garnered quality, but upon being, or being, what can I call it, if I could just get it, or beingness. Yet, if the qualities garnered are needed for work within the world of form, they can be accessed at any time. So we don't keep our attention upon differentiated quality. We keep our attention upon the presence of being, of beingness, of the one dissolver, as it were. I sometimes search for words which are meaningful to me, as I would suggest for you to do, to search for words that are meaningful to you, to make more real this state of being, more real than the state of absorption in differentiated quality, which is at least higher than the state of absorption in differentiated form. So at the same time, all the results of the lesser identifications are held in solution and can be accessed. The various differentiations and distinctions and the many ray instincts, impulses, and intuitions, we would say, all available for work within the world of illusion, wherein we all, perforce, must work. The garnered and expressed qualities and the possible actions and reactions and awarenesses are equally eternally present and capable of reacquisition at will, but they are all held below the threshold of consciousness. Well, he's saying exactly what I'm saying, only he says it better. These qualities can be utilized in our service, but where is our real attention? This is the factor. This is the important thing. Where is our real attention focused? When we drive a car, you know, it's obvious. We're not, every time we have to shift the gear or turn on the signal or turn the wheel, we're not thinking, oh, now I have to do this. It's an automatic habit. It's become instinctual at this point. It's a part of our system of responses. And so it goes with all of these possible actions and reactions and awarenesses. They are eternally present and capable of reacquisition. The Tibetan he is, at this time we would say, triadally focused. He doesn't have a causal body per se. All of his qualities have been absorbed into the spiritual triad. He is a present and to be manifested master in the New Age, and yet he can recall precisely and exactly different experiences that he's had when he was on the path of discipleship, and he informs us of these experiences for teaching value and so forth. He has the memory of these things, even though he may not have, well, it's hard to say. He has been working in a body that was born, apparently, by natural means. And so I suppose there is, or was up to a certain point, the preservation of certain permanent atoms. We don't think that he was working in a Maya Varupa as Master Moria and Master K.H. were. Who knows? Maybe by this time he may be. But even in a high initiate, the permanent atoms can be preserved. But when they are, I just begin to realize, you know, if a person does not die during the fourth degree experience, there must come a time when there is a conflagration of the permanent atoms, of the lower atomic triangle. Does this actually happen in the life in which the fourth initiation is taken, or are those members of the lower atomic triangle somehow preserved? And if it does happen, and if there is this great conflagration of the causal body at the fourth degree, I think it can be assumed that in his life, in the 19th century, Master DK did take the fourth initiation, and then the fifth in 1875, apparently in the same body. So are those permanent atoms in a way destroyed? Is there a fiery experience of the destruction of the egoic lotus, and then if the body is retained, is it retained through some ability to regenerate those permanent atoms from the spiritual triad? These are technicalities which are not discussed. You know, what happens when the physical body is retained after the destruction of the causal body. That is really an interesting question to pursue. But in any case, all of these garnered abilities are held below the threshold of consciousness. Livingness, being, wholeness, and unity are distinctive characteristics of this highly evolved stage of identification, with, what can we call it? That. Which is, so, livingness, being, wholeness, unity. These are the great factors, and these we have to instill, or they should be characteristic of our type of consciousness. Our distinctive characteristics of this highly evolved stage, which is, in its turn, the foundation for that higher evolutionary cycle of which we know nothing, but which is hinted at in the Treatise on Cosmic Fire, and in all references to the 7 paths which open up before the adept of the 5th initiation, and to be pursued at the period of the 6th initiation. And I've just been dealing with those because I've been working on the 7 paths in the Treatise on Cosmic Fire, and in Raised Initiation, and also in Initiation Human to Solar. And those commentaries, by the time you are reading this, should be increasingly available. So absorption into the one life is the nature of this elevated state of consciousness, and we're told that identification is realization plus esoteric experience plus absorption into the whole. So identification is realization, esoteric experience plus absorption into the whole. This is our great goal. Then we can truly be disciples in relation to the great logos of Sirius, and have started an entirely new line of development. Absorption into the one life is the nature of this elevated consciousness, and I think we should practice this. Obviously we'll get better at it life after life, but we should practice the realization of absorption into the one life, and that which is the same thing, only expressed differently, being that one life. Our attention should be focused on that which is and that which substands all apparency. Every content of consciousness is really an apparency, especially the formal contents of consciousness, the form-related contents. We should practice being that which substands. Freedom from all that is implied in the use of the words form and ego, lower ego, and also ego maybe on the higher mental plane, is the major characteristic, and therefore many ancient scriptures, when attempting to deal with and explain this supernormal and superlative condition, are forced back into the use of negatives, the so-called doctrine of negation. Not this, not that, sometimes referred to as neti, not this, not that. But we're getting into a section of the book here where we're talking about a stage of consciousness characterized by this freedom, by this absorption, by this sense of livingness, beingness, wholeness, unity, many word sounds to hint at or describe a great state of realization. And if we don't achieve that, we can think we know many things, but the main event, the main realization will be missing. So the scriptures are forced back upon the use of negation, and only by indicating what this state or condition of awareness is not can any idea be conveyed of what it essentially is. The negations thus met with and frequently misunderstood by the Occidental reader are therefore the result of the futility and inadequacy of language to express the reality then known. So we would say that language struggles to express these greater realizations of reality. And it's a Geminian method, this kind of contrasting. We learn what a thing is by what it is not. So we concentrate on the opposite in order to reveal that which we cannot really describe. And I'm sure that many of us have studied or read literature in which this doctrine of negation is used, until we finally discover that we have to negate everything, every perception, and yet somehow reclaim it after negation. We reclaim every perception as if it were essence. So you say that after negating the essential reality, or after the apparent reality of every content of consciousness or perception, we reclaim those contents and perceptions as essence. We realize that a thing has no reality in and of itself, even though it's an apparent actuality. We realize that substanding it is that from which it arose, is the essence, is no thing at all. It may be a pattern of energy which itself must be substanded by something still more essential. So our consciousness goes inward all the time, and we perceive ever more subtle substanding factors which substand the apparencies which we perceive as real, and yet they are not real. So we take away the reality of the apparencies, or we must remove, let's call it reality, from apparencies, from that which is apparently real. And this takes practice. This is an everyday matter. We're constantly perceiving around us all manner of things and people, and DK calls this the phantasmagoria. The phantasmagoria is not real. Phantasmagoria is not real. Rather, it arose from what is real, and the only reality it has is its origin in that which is real. Well, anyway, we're dealing with certain high perceptions which the one called the Blessed One will have, and which we in our normal human state do not have. And so we'll see in just a moment what these are all about. What I'm going to do, I've learned, I'm just going to make 1-hour programs now rather than go on and make longer ones, because I've learned that we can make it possible for you to receive them more quickly, more expeditiously if I do that. After the major initiations are undergone, the state of consciousness of the illumined and liberated adept, see, illumined at the 5th degree of revelation, in the and liberated at the 4th degree, is such that language only serves to blind and to hinder true understanding. The consciousness of the initiate is of so lofty a nature that it can only be described in terms of release, of negation, and through the emphasis of that which it is not. And so we find ourselves saying, you know, well, if it is not this, then what is it? And then our intuition works to reveal what it may be. It is a state of no thing and non-ego. In other words, unlimited self-perception, or self-perception which is not limited by form, or really by any, I'll just call it specificity. So it's the state of no thing and non-ego, for all egoic awareness is superseded, followed by and triumphed over by a state of being and of consciousness, which is only capable of comprehension and expression when the form life is of no further use to the perfected spiritual life, and so necessarily this follows the 4th degree. It is the state of non-individuality, or, you know, supra-individuality, or the state of the all-inclusive individual, as in the statement, you know, this one, naught is but me, yet with the subconscious knowledge and gains of the individual experience. It's as if I have been an encapsulation of being consciousness, but am no longer so. The center of consciousness is so far removed from any individual's separate identity that that particular factor has faded out entirely. The sense of isolated individualism, and isolated has taken its place, isolated unity. And only the macrocosmic life is sentiently realized. So another way of saying this is one is attuned to the whole. It is a state of non-activity from our present angle of vision, because all individual reactions to the activity of matter and to the state of being which we call egoic, so that's two states, no attention to form in the lower three worlds, and no attention to egoity on the higher mental plane. So all individual reactions to, and it's individual reactions, it's not necessarily, I mean, one still perceives, of course. Otherwise, masters would be completely impractical beings. They wouldn't be able to deal with this world of personhood and illusion, or even with the world of the soul, so they do see and comprehend, but they don't have the individual reaction. They have the reaction or the response as if the whole were responding. I knew a man who was like that in person, and when he used the word I, he didn't mean any individual at all. He meant the larger encompassing consciousness. So it is a state of non-activity from our present angle of vision, because all individual reactions to the activity of matter or to that state of being which we call egoic have dropped away, and life and mind can no longer be swept into motion by any of those factors which have hitherto produced what we have called soul activity or form existence. It is obvious here, though, that life and mind remain, but are not swayed by lower impacts. The lower worlds are used by the stable, higher, let's call it spirit identified consciousness. All right, let's see where we are here. I think we're at the point where we can say that this is the this is the end of let's call it the Blessed One webinar commentaries, number 1. And Esoteric Psychology 2, page 31, and we will, the beginning of the Blessed One webinar commentaries 2, Esoteric Psychology 2, page 31, and let's do the great invocation together. That will take us to the point. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men, let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. Okay, friends, we will leave it at that, and we'll come back right in this section in the Blessed One's webinar commentaries, Esoteric Psychology, page 31. We'll see you soon.